last convention, the Toastmasters convention, I attended in Ohio. One of the key speakers, actually, I think his name was Love, his last name, it might be Alexander Love, but he did a 45-minute presentation on just this. He apparently used to teach voice lessons, and now he actually does actors with a huge repertoire of fantastic people that he has trained. And imagine an audience of 2,000 or 3,000 people getting up and practicing, where he could actually had you feel your Adam's apple and told you where you wanted that rise and the difference. So you can actually feel where he wanted your voice and the difference of what your Adam's apple is actually doing and how to get the air up versus down to really do more control. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. I was thinking of picking up the book for Kathy so she can add it to this, but she'd be dangerous. More voice lessons. This reminds me, how many people use flip charts and are comfortable with flip charts today? This reminds me of a story last night. Kathy and I were actually at a meeting, and there was a presentation that they expected the visual to work. And as all technology has its flaws, it didn't. So there was really 15 minutes now that we wasted, and then they ended up sitting there just speaking. What if they had thought of a backup? And this is a wonderful method because it's not outdated. You have an opportunity to make some cognitive connections as in handwriting. And today we lose that connection. Many of the kids today are not learning script and writing. And there's definite research that says there's cognitive connections between the handwriting and the brain and making those connections. And there's certain do's and don'ts about flip charts. Some even are very offensive if you use markers that are really smelly. I happen to like Mr. Script. So usually anytime I'm going anywhere and doing anything, knowing that I am going to be writing on a flip chart, I have my scented markers. Purple is grape, you have cherry, you have lime, it's wonderful, chocolate.
And you bring them with you?
I usually bring them with me. And there are also do's and don'ts as far as what color. Does anybody have an idea of what colors you might not choose to use if you were writing on a flip chart and happened to have been sitting in the back of the room? Yellow. Orange is another one that technically you don't use. And a lot of times red, because red also indicates sometimes a disaster, usually if you're not making budget. And sometimes you're even encouraged to stay away certain color combinations because that can actually trigger. Orange and brown and orange and black might signal Halloween. And you can actually have people be lost in thoughts as they're thinking about what those colors are doing for them, because colors also make a difference to people. Red and green might symbolize Christmas, so you want to stay away from certain combinations. I happen to love this turquoise one, and usually the rule of thumb is to only use 2. Otherwise, it gets very confusing. I'm going to use brown, and I'm going to use the turquoise. They also, the difference between some of the markers, these are wedged. And if you have a wedged marker, you have an opportunity to have a clearer kind of printing. So the difference. Usually you have some form of title. And you don't usually do that. Technically, you're not supposed to use the capital letters. I don't know why.
Not all caps.
Not all caps. I think it's just easier to read. The other idea is to have 5 or 6 lines per flip chart. You also want to do is either do a dash or a square to separate your lines. What this can be used for, if you're going back as a summarization, it's an opportunity for you to check to indicate that somebody has already, that the point has been made, or you're coming back and summarizing your point. So you want to do a line. Usually an inch for every 10 people. Flipchart should technically not be used if you have a room that's greater than 25 people. Then it becomes lost. You can't really see. 2 inches if you have people that are up to 25, just the sheer distance that people are sitting. Separate your lines between with color, and purposely never talk while you're writing on the flip chart, unless you can sit and write very well sideways, because what happens is you end up talking to the flip chart and people can't hear you. It doesn't reverberate and bounce back and hit the end. Yes, Christine?
And the other thing is the silence is really scary when you're doing that, but like when I'm sitting here watching you do it, it's not a big deal.
It isn't, but you feel it.
Yeah.
I don't feel it anymore, but I used to. But you,
The silence draws us in, and the act of writing and not speaking is what's going on, curiosity.
and I might have broken the rule, but technically you should not also, bless you, use more than 2/3 of the actual chart paper. Sometimes, depending on where you are, you might want to find out if you can use the Post-it ones that you can stick on the wall. Many places, I do a lot of Toastmaster conferences, and some of the hotels, you're not allowed to post anything on the wall, so be careful of that. But generally, you either have the opportunity to have the Post-it, or you have, and the first thing I usually do is cut up masking tape. And usually the flip chart paper is pretty longer with a border, and I usually mark it down so that when I want to flip it, and somebody from an audience is always going to run up and help you, that you instantly have tape that you can put it on and run away. So you're not actually doing any maintenance kind of stuff while you're doing it. The other thing, if you're going to do a major presentation, never go directly. If you're going to pre-do your charts, which I highly recommend, because usually you know what you're going to say, always leave a space between. And then what I generally do is earmark the end of the pages so that when you're pulling the page up, you're going directly to the next chart underneath. If you have an opportunity and you might not know everything you're going to say, or you're concerned what you're going to say might be lost, you can pencil in very lightly over some of the areas that you are a little bit hesitant about or you want to elaborate on and make sure that you're not losing what you have to say. No one can see what you write up here in pencil. Same token, if you want a chart that you want to display, either a bar chart, a pie graph, you can draw it on in pencil. And then when you're actually using your markers, you can bring it alive by drawing it at that same time, but it's pre-drawn for you. And again, nobody knows the difference if it's pre-drawn like that. So. What other questions?
What about drawings? What about, we worked on our anthropomorphic images, happy faces, and cars and buses versus words. What would you suggest on using those types of devices?
If you can draw, it might be more cumbersome. If somebody can't draw at all, would you want to do that? But certainly you can make a point by drawing something. A picture is usually worth 1,000 words, whether you're showing a picture or you're drawing it. I think it's useful. Most people don't mind because they don't realize, or they realize that you're not an artist. They don't expect a 3D picture of something with perfect scale. They actually, it makes you feel comfortable that somebody is able to express something in another form. Remember, everybody is not going to be locked to a particular word. People are going to be visual. People want to see a big picture. People want to see a flow chart. And sometimes as you're walking something through, it lends a wonderful opportunity that somebody can interject and ask a question as you're building something, which often can't be done when you're locked into a PowerPoint.
2 years ago, we did, I wasn't part of it, but I saw the results. Cost a boatload of money, which is why it was only done once, but we hired an external, I guess it was an artist, but they basically sat in with white foam core boards that were maybe 4 by 8 sheets. So they were easy to move around. She could pick them up, move them around when she needed to, and she actually did that. She kind of
Describe the
by
meeting.
pictures, just kind of listened to the discussions that were going on, and just cataloged visually what was being said through pictures.
There's a demonstration of that down the hall.
Is there?
And yeah, you can, it's a storyboard,
Yeah.
and you can follow, and it has movement and energy and colors. So if you were to run a major conference, you might consider hiring somebody like that to, record in an engaging way the dialogue.
But in which it lends itself to, if you're using Flipchart, it also lends itself very well to do a bit of brainstorming after your presentation is over to capture feedback. It reminds me of when being a retiree from IBM, and we used to go worldwide consulting to do problem determination. Problems that really were costing the company millions of dollars or preventing millions of dollars worth of capture. So this was all internal. So the CEO decided to get with Jack Welch, create a customized methodology for problem solving, and use it internally to solve things. PowerPoint was not an option because you were getting worldwide subject matter experts that touched particular problems in a room for 5 days, brainstorming. You could spend 5 days just figuring out how to capture your information on a flip chart, not a flip chart, a PowerPoint. First day is just brainstorming and realizing from an emotional standpoint that you all have the same problem. After that, the creativity started. So it was the creative people, the subject matter experts, and then country managers, general managers, executives who touched the problem and had budget implications to it, which could be sometimes 7 people with the matrix, and this was the whole issue that was causing problems. To get into a room, brainstorm, and almost like on the back of a napkin, put down the issues. And a lot of that was exactly that. Flip charts, little stickies, was all about storyboarding and putting it, because the first chart had to be, what is the big picture? What was the why that they wanted to see? Because they had to make a decision on the spot whether they were going to accept it and pay for it. They had to see 80% of the work being done, and they weren't allowed to second guess. So we had to actually educate them on how to behave, as well as the subject matter experts who believed they worked for a technology company. How come we're not using PowerPoint? Because PowerPoint was absolutely disconnecting the brain from the creativity. It was not allowing you to think. So everything was strictly done on flip charts and paper.
With the brain connection. What about the issue of how to hold the pens, cap on, cap off, cap on, drop the pen, the whole awkwardness and fumbling and distraction with the pen itself?
It becomes no different than hands in the pocket, wiggling change, snapping a pen. It becomes another crutch or a tool, if not. Generally, you probably should let go of them. There's usually a base on your flip chart paper. The tray. I usually keep the 4 colors that I want to use, maybe 2 on each side if I'm going to rotate. I'm going to use 2, I might have 4 colors, but I'm only going to use 2 per whatever chart. I might change if I'm changing some kind of theme or thought and I'm going on to a new topic. Depends on the length of your presentation. Ideally, you're not really holding on to them, and what you don't want to do is keep snapping, because some people will just snap. It also gets a little dangerous because your hand can get pretty stained from the color. Generally, you would have something to put them down with. I wouldn't hold on to them.
One other point of, if you're going to plan to use flip charts, you want to, again, be prepared So look what we ended up with. Because I just
Very wobbly.
assumed that those beautiful flip charts on rollers would be in this room as I found them. And they turned out to be in that room. And I didn't get here early enough, so the other group turfed and took both those, and we had nothing. So again, we're trying to solve the problem. We have those desktop ones, not big enough. These guys are pretty precarious. It's an easel, doesn't really have a proper locking device. It's hard to move around, it can collapse. So we're kind of in a compromise here. There's something that's unstable and then steady. So if it's a big presentation, know what equipment's in the room. Again, I think this is really saying a lot. You have to buy or you secure your own set of markers and you insist on fresh markers every time. I mean, we don't want to be wasteful. If you don't have your own markers, test the markers that are in the room and throw away the ones that are out of ink. Just don't even let them be part of the mix there. So again, I sometimes will write on the bottom of the page. Now, tell them the critique you gave of me last night.
Never use script. She uses 4 different colors in one thing, but she'll mix script. The other thing, if you're really afraid that your writing tends to go on a slant, either up or down, I think down tends to be negative, up is positive if you've ever had handwriting analysis. Curly cues is sarcastic, but don't get it. They actually have flip charts that have grids. Again, from a distance, you wouldn't be able to see them. So if you're really, really cognizant about what you want it to look like, and sometimes when you're brainstorming and you're writing and scripting, trying to get the essence of what somebody is saying, it's not going to be quite as neat as if you were pre-doing your charts. But there is a grid that you can use so that you can at least stay on a line so people are not reading. Yes?
How about etiquette, like if you make a mistake and you scratch it out?
Excellent. What you also can do, again, if you're pre-done and you're busy making it, you can use, I used to carry white out all the time rather than make a whole chart all over because some of the charts were pretty extensive and it was pretty well done and it looked neat so far and you say for one letter, use white out. You also can actually cut a piece of paper with a little X-Acto knife and do a glue stick and cut a piece of paper and put it over it. Again, if you're pre-done.
I actually used Post-its because I read the wrong line from my cheat sheet and put it on there and it made no sense when I backed up, so I used Post-it and saw it across.
What if it's live? Like what if you misspelled script? How do you handle that?
Well, it depends on your audience, but a lot of times people can, they can relate to you if they're not. And when you're standing up here, words look totally different. You have to really stand back and say, okay, how do I spell that again? But sometimes what I will do, I'll just put it, not quite sure. I'm human. And then they're not going to really look at how many times have you watched a presentation and somebody made a faux pas and spelled something wrong? How many are really paying attention to that presentation after that? Or are they looking for the next misspelled word as if they're going to get a prize? And that's what happens. So this, I'll just fess up right up front that I made a mistake, and that's not the priority of why I'm here. I'm here to capture your thoughts.
You don't verbalize
I don't
it.
say anything.
You just record it.
I don't say anything. Otherwise, does somebody else want to get up here and scribe? No, most people don't.
Right. What about that idea that you're speaking, partnering with someone to scribe, someone to speak? How about that teaming?
The team, as far as somebody scribing, well, somebody's actually talking, and the person that's, if somebody is looking at somebody capturing what the essence of something was done, the person who's actually grabbing and doing the brainstorming session should always make sure that the person who is scribing has captured the essence of what the audience said. You don't necessarily have to capture word for word, but you want to get the gist of it. And so they might play back and ask, have we captured it correctly? And somebody can make that adjustment. But just to make sure. So sometimes what somebody might do in shorthand might have missed a certain essence. So it's important, if it's something big and lengthy, that that facilitator should make sure that they captured everything correctly.
So
Also,
That said, and you want to make a word bold out like don't, do, is it
And you
best to
emphasize.
underline it, to make it all caps? What's the best caption?
I usually make it all capital. Sometimes in PowerPoint, they tell you not to underline. I sometimes will underline as well, sometimes in another color, but usually capitalized.
Okay.
And usually standing to the side so you're not blocking it and making sure wherever angle that you are, most people can see the flip chart.
So we've talked about it, we've demonstrated it, and now to lock in the learning, we want to have you try it on. So this next part,
And the other thing is always remove whatever you had, so whoever come up next, if they don't do it, you as the scriber, just remove it so it's fresh. So the person coming up next
clear.
is not using your message.
Would you?
Absolutely. They can try them on actually to see the difference.
So we'll put the microphone down, so you can just put the mic, we'll just capture this, so there's an exercise. It may be part of your presentation, could be something you did yesterday, it could be something extemporaneously, but we'd just like to come see you, try out the flip chart, working with flip chart, and we'll get some feedback. Okay, so I'd like each of you to do that, please. River, you want to hit us off?
Just anything?